CBS Center, continuing coverage of the 2016 Democratic National Convention here in Philadelphia. It has been a busy, feisty day one of this convention. And joining us now to talk more about that, we have Linda Tran, CBS Center political contributor, founder of 270 Strategies, also worked for then-Governor Tim Kaine, right? And we also have Frank Luntz, Republican strategist, GOP pollster, and CBS News contributor. All right, I'm actually going to start with the Republican here because, Frank, you've actually been talking to Democrats, is that right?
Yes.
Tell me about some of the interesting things that they have been telling you about how they feel about this election.
So you've got, and I've been studying the Bernie Sanders voters, and you have about 70% of them that are already fully in Hillary Clinton's camp. There's about 15% that are seriously considering voting for Donald Trump and 15% that are trying to decide whether or not they're going to stay. His speech tonight is going to be, to me, the most important speech of the convention other than Hillary Clinton, because he's going to have to give a stronger endorsement than, of course, what Ted Cruz did at the Republican convention. Now, he's going to say the words, "I support Hillary Clinton," and he's going to criticize Trump. The question is, does he say to the people in this room, you have to make this decision, because if you don't, then Donald Trump wins. It has to be strong, clear, unambiguous, and up to now he's not done that, so that's what I'm going to be looking for.
But Frank, he did that earlier today and was booed almost off his own stage.
And I don't well, this is I don't understand this. I did not understand Ted Cruz when he speaks to the Republicans and leaves the convention hall without making the endorsement. Then don't go on. Yeah, show up, wave to everybody, but then don't go on. And in Bernie Sanders' case, he's the only one that they will listen to. They will not take an endorsement recommendation from Hillary Clinton. They won't from any of these. Even Michelle Obama could not deliver them. Barack Obama could not deliver them. It's got to come from Bernie Sanders, and he's got to take the risk to say to them, stop. And by the way, I'm not convinced that he will. So, I mean, to me, that's the drama. And I'm surprised the Democrats put him on in the best slot of the whole night. It's like, I haven't been this excited since McDonald's gave 2-for-1 burgers. You're killing the joke here.
We've seen. I'll never step on. I'll see the line coming next time.
What are you, Bill Maher?
This is. Oh, we're going there. Another story for another time. Yeah. But this is a complex calculus. The appeasement of Bernie Sanders and the comfort level, especially with regard to Hillary Clinton, whether it is the pick of Tim Kaine as her running mate, a platform, what's she willing to, not just what's she willing to accept on the platform, what is she willing to stump for as well? It's a complex calculus.
But it isn't. It is very simple. If he does not do it, she may not win. It is that clear. The Republicans united because of the selection of Mike Pence. Now, it may not have won independent voters, but it brought the Republicans together. She has to walk out of this convention with a united Democratic Party. She cannot have yelling on the left. So it is very simple. If he doesn't come through with a clear cut, not just an endorsement, but to actually say to those voters there, stop, you're making a mistake, then her election is in jeopardy.
All right, so for anyone that's just joining and is just learning about all these convention shenanigans, for lack of a better word,
great word.
We want to go ahead and play for you that sound that Josh is referencing of Senator Sanders speaking to his own delegates and getting booed earlier in the day. Let's listen.
And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine. Brothers and sisters, this is the real world that we live in. Trump is a bully and a demagogue. Trump has made bigotry and hatred the cornerstone of his campaign. Throughout this campaign, he has insulted Mexicans and Latinos. He has insulted Muslims. He has insulted women and African Americans.
But there's a difference. I understand what he said. It's not what they heard, and that's what matters here. And we've studied this. Yes, he gave a full-throated endorsement, but that is not the same as them accepting it. He needs to address not Hillary Clinton, but those voters, these delegates. If you leave, I would write it for him. If you leave this room tonight, if you leave this arena, and you are in any way undecided, you will elect Donald Trump, the next president of the United States. I appreciate your support. I value it. It means more to me than anything you have ever done. But if you really believe in what I believe in, then you have no choice than to support this person. He has to connect to them, and he hasn't done it. Do you understand? There's a difference between...
And your conversations, though, with Sanders voters suggests...
that he's failing.
But that he can control them.
Oh, God, that would be the worst word ever for them.
But that's what you're saying.
He's influential with them. He needs to write an op-ed, not in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. He needs to write an op-ed in The Nation. He needs to write an op-ed in Mother Jones to reach them.
Obviously, here at the Democratic National Convention, Linda, they're attempting to highlight this issue, the plight of undocumented immigrants, and trying to draw a very direct and stark contrast between what the Democrats are proposing and what the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, is proposing.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's a little bit of doubling down on what they know is working. So we started off many, many months ago hearing from Donald Trump and his remarks that Mexicans are sending rapists across the border, and that was already pushing away a very, very critical voting bloc in general in this country, but increasingly for Democrats. And so when you start to highlight dreamers, when you start to highlight the real human stories of the lack of comprehensive immigration reform, that's just bringing the base up to a fever pitch, and it's helping Democrats over the long term.
And it matters in Florida. You can just check off the states. It matters in Florida. It matters in Nevada. It matters in Arizona. It matters in Colorado. You take those 4 states. If all 4 of those states vote Democratic, then Hillary Clinton's the next president. The Latino vote is significantly larger than the African American vote, and it does fluctuate back and forth. It does swing. Which is why I expect to see a lot more of that over the next 4 days. If you can reach them and you speak to them in Spanish, which is what Marco Rubio tried to do, Ted Cruz tried to do, you're going to have a significant impact.
Well, and it matters in this cycle, but it also could matter for a generation. I mean, in reality, when we talk about the demographic shifts that are happening in Latino and Hispanic communities, eventually you could deliver a state like Texas, which would really completely reshape the map altogether. And then when you have a running mate like Tim Kaine, who's completely fluent in Spanish because he was a missionary in Honduras, that certainly helps shape the story for the campaign.
Well, then you should actually advise him in the middle of the presidential debate when they ask him about immigration. Well, let me respond to that, and then do it in Spanish.
Nobody has to advise him that. He would do that.
And then he would turn to Mike Pence and say, Governor, what do you think about what I just said?
Again, on this issue of illegal immigration, trying to strike a very different tone than what we've heard from the Republicans, Linda.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. All of this stuff really pulls at the heartstrings. And regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, when you hear a young woman talk about her hopes and her dreams and what this country means to her, you've got to feel a little bit of movement there. And then when you start to contrast it with what you're hearing from the other side, when Donald Trump says about a judge that because he's of a Mexican heritage that he can't be somebody who's neutral and who could preside over a case. It's just such a sharp and amazing contrast. There's no way that they wouldn't really want to lean into this as hard as possible.
The generalities help Trump. The specifics help Clinton, which I've never seen before. So when Trump says we have to get control of the border, everybody agrees, Democrats, Republicans. But then when you talk about building a wall, that consensus goes away. When you say that you have to abide by rule of law, everyone says absolutely. But then you talk about the challenges facing dreamers, the public has a heart. They have compassion. So once again, I've never seen a convention in the 25 years I've been doing this where there's certain areas, and you have mostly women. I've been watching this. Mostly women have been speaking at the Republican convention. It was mostly men. Yeah. Very smart on the Democratic side, very smart on the Republican side.
Policy is not the friend of the GOP, or at least policy specifics, it would seem.
Principles are the friend of the GOP. Specifics are the friends of the Democrats.
So there's also the idea, as we talk demographically about this, the numbers certainly suggest the Democrats will have the Latino vote. They will have the African-American vote. But we've also heard this is going to be a turnout election, and that could be the X factor there, that they can't, while they can look to marshal the Obama coalition demographically, the real challenge is going to be turning them out in the numbers that they came out in 2008 and again in 2012.
That's Bernie Sanders. And by the way, you're so right about Texas, but by the time that happens, I will be living in New Zealand. So you'll have to beam me in from some foreign country. I'll need a passport to get on the air. The question then becomes, to 18 to 29-year-olds, do they vote? Because right now they support the Democrats over the Republicans by almost 2 to 1. It has never been that way. But I do need to balance this. For every younger white woman who is voting for Hillary Clinton that tends to vote Republican, there is an older white man, working class, that normally votes Democrat and is now supporting Donald Trump. Since the Republican convention over the last 10 days, that shift has come among white male voters over age 50. The Democrats have never done as badly as they are among them, just as Republicans have never done as badly among Latino voters right now.
That's part of the reason why we keep harping on the young voters, right? Because in 2012, somewhere around 23 million of them cast ballots, but they're not necessarily reliable voters. Yeah. 2008, 2012, we saw a repetition. They were roughly about 19% of the electorate both times. They've got to do it again this time because overwhelmingly they vote Democratic. Well,
and overwhelmingly, at least in the primary, they have been going to Bernie Sanders, who
exactly
is only tenuously connected to this party. Again, we can raise the stakes then, really, on what we're going to hear from Bernie Sanders tonight in any way.
Whoever thought that the oldest candidate ever in American history would bring so many of these young people? I used to say that Bernie Sanders was so old, it took him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes. I can now tell that joke on CBS because it's appropriate to you all.
You know what Bob Schieffer said in response to that comment once was, I think it's nice when young people like old people.
Yes, he did say that. He did say that.
But you see somebody like Bob Schieffer. I mean, look.
He's a rock star.
He's yeah. Having him here.
That's right.
He's synthesizing this, having covered 25.
When he walks down there, everybody, forget the senators, the congressmen, the performers, they all want to meet Bob Schieffer. I want to meet Bob Schieffer. You promised that if I came on here tonight, I would get a chance to meet Bob Schieffer.
The night's early. The night's early, Frank. Frank, I wonder, we make a lot of the numbers with regard to honesty and trustworthiness as they impact Hillary Clinton. What did the same numbers say about Bernie Sanders?
Oh, he's the most trusted political figure in America today, with John McCain a close second. And it's funny that McCain's written out of the Republican Party and Sanders has some trouble within the Democratic Party. Clinton's weakness is integrity. Trump's weakness is hate, is anger. And both of them are at the core of how we decide who we're going to vote for. We don't want to vote for someone who we think doesn't like us, and we don't want to vote for someone who we think isn't honest with us. So she has 4 nights to prove that we can trust her, just as Trump had 4 nights to prove that he was actually presidential. The polling that we've seen so far suggests that Trump was successful. And in fact, what I'm going to watch is in the Republican convention, they spent 3.5 nights beating up on Hillary Clinton and only 1 hour supporting Donald Trump. You tell me, what's the ratio of pro-Clinton versus anti-Trump here? I don't know.
I don't know, but we did also see a poll today out from CNN, I'm sure you looked at it, that the performance at the Republican National Convention wasn't entirely well received. Something like 1 in 5 voters thought that his speech was, quote, terrible, and that there was too much attacking of Democrats. So that's worth noting as well. The Clinton campaign and all these folks have already signaled very, very strongly that they're going to spend the bulk of their time telling the story about the fabric of America. We're seeing that now, and also talking about what the big picture is for the country moving forward under Hillary Clinton candidacy.
If we're seeing then who these folks will be reaching out to over these 4 days, Frank, I also wonder, a lot was made of the fact that heading into Cleveland, Donald Trump really had the support of only 75 to 80% of likely Republican voters, and that number needed to be up in the 90s to have a shot.
And it is now.
November. So that's where it sits now.
So that was the movement, was Republican voters and older white male voters. That is actually enough to take him through November. But of course, they're going to have 4 nights of primetime television to get a chance to give the competing narrative. By the time this is done, I think she will have about a 2-point lead, but they will be within the margin of error in Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, Colorado, Iowa, all the states that matter. We are going to have the crummiest, meanest, most vicious election. And thank God we have to go to break, because I could just add a few more superlatives of how awful this is going to be.
And Frank, apropos of nothing that we just saw, Paul Manafort has, I hope we have your mic for an answer here. He has, in the last really 72 hours after the convention in Cleveland, broadly has greatly expanded the idea of the swing state. He has said now as many as 20 states could be in play. He is. We were handed some of the remarks of Governor Daniel Malloy from Connecticut. According to the Trump campaign, they have numbers that suggest Connecticut could be in play. Oregon could be in play. Are you seeing numbers that support that?
I was, but I was at the Betty Ford Clinic at the time, and now that I'm sober, no. But Florida is in play.
I mean, you mentioned Donald Trump today in Virginia.
Yes.
Another.
I don't understand why he's there. With Tim Kaine is so popular in Virginia that I don't care who the nominee would be. Tim Kaine is going to take Virginia and move it over to the Democratic camp. But Donald Trump, people ask me, there's no way he can be elected president. It's usually people from New York who live on the Upper East Side that wouldn't even consider voting Republican anyway, and Trump scares them. But let's be accurate. Trump has the capability now to be president. He has delivered the speech that provides the rationale for his election, and most importantly, Hillary Clinton's negatives are now up close to 60%. The last time we elected a president who had 60% negatives, never. Not a single time in modern American history when they were doing polling ever has someone won the presidency. So we have 2 candidates that are deeply disliked. If I can give you one more statistic, over 1/3 of Americans dislike both Clinton and Trump. It's going to be not just the lesser of 2 evils, it's going to be the one that they distrust the least.
And a remarkably dissatisfied electorate on November 9th.
It gives me a headache. I feel like I'm going through a divorce. I'm sitting with two parents, and I'm going to have to choose which one I'm going to live with for the next 4 years, and I desperately want the courts to take me away.
So then,
you don't smile.
No, I do. I'm thinking. I know camera 2 is lingering on you, and I'm thinking about. So how am I going to follow that up? And there's really no following you up, Frank. That's what I've come to learn.
And I do this, and I actually mean to be serious. Because if you don't crack jokes about this, then you have to accept where we are. And the thing that is most upsetting is that the protesters, and I spent a fair amount of time with them today, the protesters, it's more than just angry. They think they've lost their country. The Trump voters think they've lost their country. The Clinton voters are afraid they're going to lose their country. We have not had this kind of division, this inability to talk to each other, to crack a joke with each other, to share a drink with each other. This is not 1980 with Ronald Reagan. This is not even Barack Obama 2008 or 2012. And I don't know how to fix it. I'm so excited to sit next to a Democratic colleague because we have to figure out some way to talk to each other because one of us is going to win. And we're living in a country where 47% deserve to be heard. 47% deserve to have a vote in Capitol Hill. And we don't have that anymore.
Well, then I wonder for both of you, how much harder does it make your jobs? We heard our Major Garrett joined us today, and I think he encapsulated it maybe as best as it can be, in that with the fervent force of these 2 bottom-up movements that we have seen really overtake both major political parties, that looking for precedent in discussing what we think might happen is a fool's errand at this point. So, really talking to a Democratic strategist or a pollster who might have looked at past data to perhaps foretell the story to come. How how much harder does it make your job?
I mean, I agree with Frank that we are in an unprecedented place right now in terms of the dynamics between the parties, but also within the parties. There's just a lot of, I don't want to say divisiveness, but a lot of tension and a lot of disagreement about the direction the country is going in. To a certain extent, especially in the Democratic Party, I feel like there's a certain healthiness to having a really robust debate and talking about issues that being comfortable being uncomfortable, I think is really important. But what you do hope is that you end up with somebody who wants to find common ground, which is potentially some of the two running mates that we've been talking about.